Prologue. 18 years before Zelda arrived in the distant past of Hyrule. Koume tipped the point of her spear toward the foe in front of her, directly into his line of sight. The desert sun glinted off the metal, absently reminding her that she'd need to buff its worn surface in the morning. She smirked as the Hylian man cowered, his hands shaking and his breaths coming fast and rough. She admired his strong features at the same time, and had she not been commissioned to kill him, she might have secreted him into Gerudo town tonight. But alas, his fate was sealed the moment he decided to take the bounty hunt mission from the Hyrulean army, a growing concern for her people. The army itself had only just formed a few years ago, the first of many progressive moves the Hylians and certain other races in the land had made. They claimed to make a new world, coining the name Hyrule, and making moves toward forming a monarchy set on ruling everything and everyone. They hadn't yet been successful with the latter, and the Gerudo were intent upon ensuring they wouldn't be. They could not be ruled. They would not be ruled. Please don't do this. The Hylian's cheeks now streaked with tears, and Koume was no longer attracted. Weakness, especially in a man, was nothing but cowardice. If he wasn't strong, he wasn't anything. And Koume was strong. Koume understood how their world operated, a trait the Hylians seemed to lack. Hyrule be damned. You have 3 seconds to tell me who you were assigned to kill, or this spear goes directly through that eye. She aimed the spear tip at his right eye, as close as she could without touching it. Fear could root out weakness and make any man do what was necessary. She would have to pry it out of this one. Please. 3. I'm begging you. 2. She pressed the spear to his eyelid. It was the child, he rasped. The Hylian squeezed his eyes shut and sobbed harder. Koume lowered the spear tip, slightly, only out of curiosity. There were many children in Gerudo town, little girls running about, learning how to be strong. But there was also another child, barely a month old, one born of legend, of royalty and importance. The only male Gerudo in existence. He hadn't yet been given a name. The elders were debating whether to name him in accordance with what their historical volumes decreed, or to defy tradition and name him something else. Koume was of the mind that defying tradition was defying the very gods themselves. But she was no elder, and therefore held no sway. But if this Hylian was referring to this male child... What were you told exactly? She asked him, her voice barely above a whisper. She needed him to feel less fear, it seemed, for him to be more forthcoming. He hesitated, but kept his eye on the spear tip, understanding what would happen if he didn't speak. To find the male child, and to dispense with him in any way possible. And he is the key to unlocking Gerudo's subservience. He looked as though he might be sick. So, the Hyrulean army had a plan to cut the legs out from beneath the Gerudo. And perhaps they were right. In truth, if the child were to be taken out of the equation, the Gerudo would boast less strength. Koume didn't claim to know much about military politics, but she did know one thing. Her people's history proved that every 100 years they would birth a king. And prophecy foretold that king would be powerful. powerful enough to overthrow any usurper. There had never been an opportunity in the past, as far as she was aware, for that king to be challenged. But with the climate now, she gazed down at the Hylian, softening her eyes and smiling. She lowered her spear and knelt down to his level on the sand. "Thank you," she said to him, sincere in her gratitude. After all, he just gave her everything she needed to rise a little further in the ranks. Information like this was like a rare diamond. She raised her hand to his face and wiped his tears away gently, lovingly, as a mother would. She wanted him to feel safe now. His breathing slowed, and his sobs abated. And her spear was through his temple in half a second. It was the least she could do to kill him quickly. The most thanks she could give. Koume buried the unnamed Hylian in the sand and started home, a fire burning in her eyes, and a plan churning in her mind. Chapter 1. A Boy. It was as though the very desert sands hated him. "Green man, green man." The girls laughed from their bellies. He stood in the center of the circle as they danced, as they sing-songed their insults at him like silver knives. And he could only stand still, staring at the ground, allowing himself to sink further and further into his dejection and anger. He glanced down at his hands, a dark grayish green, just as they sang, and cursed them. Why did he have to look so different? Not only was he the only male Gerudo, he was the only Gerudo at all with this outlandish look. Not even Zora looked like this. Their skin was a beautiful array of color, translucent and glistening. They were otherworldly. He was just ugly. Of course, he had only seen Zora from afar, and only on one of the few trips he had taken outside of Gerudo Town with his mothers. He remembered that day like the layout of the Gerudo Underground. Koume hadn't wanted Ganondorf to come with them, but Kotake had insisted, citing that he needed to see the world over which he would one day rule. They had left Gerudo Town in search of ore, a main source of income for Kotake's small gem emporium in the city. Normally she would go alone, but this time Ganondorf would get to see what Hyrule was like outside of sand, sun, and blistering heat. He closed his eyes now, trying to feel the cool air on his face again, hear the rush of waterfalls near Zora's domain, where the ore was plentiful. He could almost taste the rain that persistently fell there, and the shrill voices of the taunting girls began to fade. Almost. "Get away, he's only a boy, get away!" A familiar, softer voice declared, dissolving his reverie and forcing him back into his ugly green body. Though the owner of that voice was his one true friend, he silently cursed it too. He may never again see the world beyond the desert, so daydreaming about it was really the only freedom he could feel. He'd have to wait until bed tonight to slip back into the daydream and hope that his actual dreams were drenched in the same beauty that was seemingly fading away from memory a little more each day. "Gan, are you okay?" Jerusa had successfully shooed away the other girls and was now inches from him, holding out her hand to grasp his shoulder. He scooted backward, avoiding her touch. "I'm fine," he replied, avoiding her eyes too. Jerusa sighed, and he knew it to be her sign of frustration, with him in particular. They'd been close since birth, as they were both born on the same day under the same sun. Ganondorf's true mother was a friend to Jerusa's, so they were raised together. They played together, learned together, and even trained together. 10 years of together, and she still tried to placate him with mercy. He had grown up in a unique circumstance, being the only male of his people. No one quite knew how to speak to him or treat him. Even the elders had trouble communicating with him. His many differences distanced him from everyone else, and when his true mother died fighting against the Hyrulean army, when he was just 2 years of age, the sisters Koume and Kotake took him in and began to raise him differently. They were the only two Gerudo who seemed to understand, to really see inside him, like he was more than just the future king who might rescue the entire Gerudo race from the usurper King Roru. Might, yes, because Ganondorf did not see himself as a king, a leader, a ruler of any kind. "Why do you let them bully you?" Jerusa asked, her hands now on her hips and her head cocked to one side. "You're the future king, Gan, the king, and you let them trample on you like a Molduga?" He simply stared meekly at the ground. Before he could react, Jerusa grabbed him by the shoulder and shook him. "You deserve better than this. Why don't you believe that?" He finally raised his eyes to meet hers and saw humor in their golden red depths. He couldn't help but smile a little. "I believe that you need a bath," he deflected, and waved his hand in front of his pointed nose, grimacing. She scoffed and pushed him, sending him flying to the ground, but not before he was able to sweep her feet out from under her. They both lay sprawled on the sands in fits of laughter. "You rat!" she squeaked. "How long has it been anyway? A week?" "Unfortunately, I'm not a royal prince who can take a bath any old second he wishes. Besides, baths are for Zora. I don't need water to live." "Everyone needs water to live," Ganondorf retorted, throwing a fist of sand at her. "Too bad you can't wash the green off you." Jerusa raised her eyebrows in challenge. "You are lucky you're a friend, or I'd..." A different voice sounded. "You'd be a gentlemanly prince and help the little lady off the ground? Now wouldn't you?" Ganondorf recognized Koume's voice and his demeanor shifted. He stood and did as he was told, reaching for Jerusa's hand, who gratefully, if sheepishly, accepted it. They stood in front of Koume, a bit awkwardly, awaiting her next words. She gazed at them with a small smirk playing on her lips. Koume could boast a whirlwind of rage, and other times, her kindness prevailed, but it was never clear which emotion one would get from her until she unleashed it. Ganondorf stood up straighter. "You two will never learn, will you?" Koume said, a chuckle escaping her throat. The children relaxed. No rage today. "Go on now, Jerusa. Tell your mother you need a bath. Even warriors need to take care of themselves." Jerusa nodded in reply and shot Ganondorf a quick, amused look before running off. Koume regarded him for a moment. "I heard those girls were taunting you again," she said, an eyebrow raised. He wanted to look to the ground, but forced his eyes to keep their level. Koume did not like anyone showing signs of weakness, especially Ganondorf. As an elder, she held fast to the rules. She'd even ensured he was named according to the prophecy, solidifying his fate. Or so she claimed. "One of these days you will have to fight one of them. When they grow older, they'll grow bolder. Someone will attempt to dominate you. That is the way of our kind, after all. And you will have to kill them." His brows drew together. She had mentioned this scenario before, and he'd never quite believed her. Gerudo fought each other all the time, of course. She was right about that. But he was to be king. Shouldn't that mean no one should challenge him, especially his own people? But Koume never said anything she didn't mean or truly believe. "That's why I'm training, right?" he said, hoping it was the reply she wanted from him. He didn't want to admit that he'd kill anyone. He didn't know if he could. It was an ultimate act that no one should take lightly. Kotake taught him that, but Koume had a bit more liberal view of taking a life. She'd done it many times. "Indeed, your training is important, not only for your physical, but your political self. You will be our ruler and protector. You must be able to do both with no hesitation." The intensity of her voice scared him a little, but he'd never let it show. He breathed deliberately and slowly, steadying himself so that he didn't shake. Without another word, Koume strode away, and he was able to relax his tightened shoulders. He sighed, the weight of his birthright heavy and burdensome. He looked down at his hands again, the green growing darker as the sun began to set. How he was to be king, he did not know. The king's hands should never tremble this much.